Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
A lasting end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only come through a two-state solution.
Increasing calls for an end to the fighting between Israel and Hamas, and a renewed push for a long-term solution.
70% of children living in low and middle income countries at 10 years old are not acquiring foundational learning.
Trying to close education gaps around the world. How UNICEF is working to overcome challenges and get more children in school. Preserving species and sparking ecotourism. One of the most biodiverse places in the world earns a new distinction. Next.
Fighting between Israel and Hamas has raged on for months, and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is dire. Some aid is getting in, but UN aid workers say it is simply nowhere near enough to address the needs in the Palestinian territory. Here at UN headquarters, the conflict is still a top priority.
It was a packed house inside the UN Security Council chamber on Tuesday. Several foreign ministers participated in the debate on the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Against the backdrop of Israel's military actions there, a mounting death toll and an escalating humanitarian crisis, many member states once again called for the war to end. But the overwhelming call was for a two-state solution, with the UN Secretary General saying any refusal to accept a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict must be firmly rejected.
A lasting end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only come through a two-state solution. Israelis must see their legitimate needs for security materialized, and Palestinians must see their legitimate aspirations for a fully independent, viable and sovereign state realized in line with United Nations resolutions, international law and previous agreements. Israel's occupation must end.
Any discussion of a post-war arrangement for Gaza that deviates from the two-state solution is tantamount to building a house on quicksand. The most important thing right now is to stop further eroding the foundations of the two-state solution.
Addressing the council here in New York, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the observer state of Palestine said the ongoing war is a premeditated effort to inflict maximum pain on the Palestinian population. He has called for an international peace conference with a clear objective of implementing UN resolutions.
The international consensus on two states in this land must be upheld in word and deed. There can be no more pretext for endless delay and obstruction. The disregard for Palestinian life, for international law, for the regional and international will to bring about just and lasting peace should no longer be tolerated. We are running out of time.
But Israel once again defended the conflict. Israeli Ambassador Gilad Erdan said if Hamas turned in those responsible for the October 7th attacks on Israel and returned the hostages, the war would end right away. While serious debate took place about a two-state solution in the Middle East, with Israel and Palestine living side by side, many member states expressed alarm at the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and the suffering of the people of Palestine, with many continuing the call for an immediate ceasefire. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
Shu Deja is monitoring developments inside the halls of the UN. Deja.
Yes, Elaine, after a few weeks of post-holiday emptiness, the UN headquarters here finally went back to a full schedule of meetings. This Tuesday, Security Council President France held its signature event, an open debate on the situation in Gaza. Since a handful of foreign ministers came to New York for this event, I asked Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, how U.S. policy on Middle East contributed to the current situation. And here is his answer. You mentioned a lot about your U.S. colleagues' words and actions on Middle East. What do you think? How much does the U.S. foreign policy on Middle East contributes to current situation in Middle East? Thank you.
The influence of the United States on the Middle East, as they say, we'll deal with this ourselves. And the same with Palestine-Israel conflict. They ended the quartet, they disbanded the quartet of the Middle East mediators, and they took everything into their own hands. We see what this resulted in. This is just another example of a situation where, as a result of the U.S. leadership, we see tragedy take place.
Also, during his visit, a Russian cargo plane carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners for exchange was downed, according to Mr. Lavrov, by Ukraine missiles. This is why Lavrov also called for an emergency meeting on this issue. Mr. Lavrov was 40 minutes late for the press conference, but we did ask him whether he's meeting with Trump's team, and he said no.
And I was wondering whether you've had a chance in the last couple of days to meet up with former President Donald Trump or with members of his campaign team.
Have you already written an article about it?
Not yet.
Thank God, because I haven't met with him.
In Gaza, Ukraine, it seems the two crises still dominated the agenda, but there are also other issues like Haiti. The Security Council has adopted a resolution endorsing a multinational force in Haiti, yet the country that is willing to send police officers, Kenya, is still waiting for the court ruling as we record this segment. Security Council had a meeting on Haiti as well. What is UN's expectation for the deployment?
This multinational support force is needed quickly, and we encourage member states to support its deployment as quickly as possible.
Say if this request has been denied by the court in Kenya, do you have plan B?
Well, it is not, I mean, as we've said repeatedly here, it is a force that will operate under a Security Council resolution. It is not a force that is being assembled or managed by the Secretariat, right, by the Peacekeeping Department. But it is, Haiti needs help, and it needs help quickly, and we hope that member states who can contribute in kind or in cash do so.
Entering February next week, the Security Council president will be Guyana, and we will see what's unfolding in February. But one thing is for sure, Middle East will still be the top priority of the UN's agenda. Elaine.
Shudija, thanks. Kampala, Uganda hosted the third South Summit between the Group of 77 and China this week. It is the largest coordination group of countries within the United Nations framework, and it represents the largest grouping of the Global South. Leaders called for reform and a more equal system for developing countries.
Righting our troubled world depends on effective global action. Yet the international system is out of date, out of time and out of step, reflecting a bygone age when many of your countries were still colonized. The United Nations Security Council is paralyzed by geopolitical divisions, and its composition does not reflect the reality of today's world. It must be reformed. And the global financial system, including the Bretton Woods institutions, have failed to provide a global safety net for developing countries in distress.
China has always worked with the South countries to uphold international justice and equity, and defend our common rights and interests in development, setting up a shining example of equality and sincere mutual assistance among the countries of the South, and blazing a broad path towards common development.
Coming up.
We have a Haiti that needs some help. We don't want a payout. We want a way out.
UN Insider.
Introducing CGTN Now. Find award-winning documentaries and exclusive content from around the world. Latin America like you've never seen. Breakthrough films shining a light on important stories. In-depth discussions with fascinating people, giving you new perspective on topics that matter. You also get live, round-the-clock international news and headlines, and so much more. Original content from CGTN's Global Bureau. Download the CGTN Now app and find the global perspective you've been missing. Available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire, or go to cgtnnow.com on your tablet or mobile device. CGTN Now. See the difference.
Haiti is in the grips of a dire security situation. Gangs have controlled much of the country for months. The UN has approved a multinational force to help Haitian police regain control. But the Kenyan-led force has yet to deploy. Haiti also marked a somber anniversary this month. It has been 14 years since a major earthquake hit the country, causing widespread destruction. Nitza Soledad Perez has more.
It's been 14 years since a massive earthquake devastated Haiti and shook the island to its core. Dozens recently gathered in Little Haiti in Miami, home to the largest Haitian community, to remember the more than 300,000 lives lost and injured on January 12th of 2010.
We can make a difference together as one.
The tremor only lasted about 35 seconds, but in that time, some 1.5 million people became homeless. Leila Duvivier was only 10 years old. She was at school that day in Port-au-Prince.
So being a kid and seeing dead bodies and seeing buildings and all the ashes, because the minute the earthquake happened, there was like a cloud of ashes that just hit everybody. So it was a little traumatizing.
Her life was forever transformed.
We left a week and a half after the earthquake. My life changed a lot. Well, I think my perspective changed because as a young kid, you think that, even though you grow up in a country where everybody's poor, you never realize how bad it is until something like that happens.
Back then, most Haitians thought that rebuilding was their country's most significant challenge.
But 10 months after the quake, there was a cholera outbreak. Approximately 10,000 people died. In July of 2021, Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated. There was more economic and political unrest. And only a month later, another large earthquake struck the southern region of Haiti, killing more than 2,000 and injuring an estimated 12,000. Once again, there was widespread destruction.
Haiti's been dying and money's been spent everywhere, but nobody remember that we have a Haiti that needs some help. We don't want a pay out, we want a way out.
In addition to the natural disasters, Haiti's gang violence is on the rise. Local organized crime is running the nation's capital and economy.
14 years ago, if anyone told me that we would be facing the situation that existing in Haiti now, I would say, hell no. And yet, this is what it is. We have children whose parents die in Haiti. They cannot go to bury their loved ones in fear of getting kidnapped and maimed and killed and collectively raped.
Despite all the hardships Haitians have faced in the last 2 decades, the Haitians here in the U.S. hope their country can emerge from the ashes. Nitza Soledad Perez, CGTN, Miami.
Wednesday marked the International Day of Education. This year's theme, Learning for Lasting Peace. Around the world, hundreds of millions of children don't have access to education. Gender inequality, poverty, and violent conflict, all among the obstacles keeping kids out of classrooms. I sat down with Robert Jenkins, UNICEF's Global Director of Education. Robert, a recent UNICEF report describes a pretty dire year ahead for children around the world, likely to see more violence, war, and economic hardship. And then we had another report that called the state of global education increasingly bleak. So what is being done when many of these children are just trying to make it through the day to survive?
Indeed, it's a very worrying situation. From an education point of view, though, there are glimmers of hope. We have some amazing examples of initiatives that are bridging children back into learning in these contexts, that are enabling children to realize their dreams. I've been in this position for about 5 years now. I have increasingly seen a commitment of the global community to enable children to learn and continue on this learning pathway despite these very real challenges.
Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education. Today, 250 million children are out of school. What remains the biggest challenges in trying to reach that goal by 2030?
So we are off track. The trends are not currently progressing at the level or rate that we need them to reach the goals that we all set collectively as a global community that need to be achieved by 2030. Now, from a positive point of view, if you're looking at the glass as half full, we have more children studying today than ever before in the world. So enrollment has increased around the world. We also have near gender parity between boys and girls in primary school level, so these are big successes. However, increasingly, we are recognizing that attending school, while absolutely critical, does not necessarily lead to learning. That means children are attending school, participating in the classroom, but are not achieving the learning levels that are required. So increasingly, we're now focusing on learning, enable every child to learn. And within that learning, we're particularly zeroing in on foundational learning, being able to read and write and do math, have a sense of safety and social emotional well-being. Just to give you one statistic, it's estimated 70% of children living in low and middle income countries at 10 years old are not acquiring foundational learning. 70%, 7 out of 10 children. So indeed, that's a real challenge. So let's leverage this amazing progress of children coming to school, but zero in on what happens at the school, enabling children to actually learn.
We hear a lot about the kids, but what about the teachers? Is there anything more that can be done to support the teachers who are helping these kids and the supplies that they need?
So if there's one determinant on a success of an education system and children being able to learn, it's the level of support to teachers. Absolutely critical. So we again have some great examples throughout the world in countries that have prioritized teachers and ministries of education that have. We have the opposite. We have many school systems that are demanding too much of teachers, underpaying teachers. So critical is for us to share those positive examples where countries have enabled sufficient levels of support to teachers, encouraging all other countries to do the same.
Do you feel like any progress has been made when it comes to the technology and the digital divide? Because for so many regions around the world, just getting access to the internet is still a challenge.
It is, indeed it is. So when schools were closed during COVID, at one point at the height of it, we had about 96% of the global student body out of school. One sort of silver lining to that incredibly challenging situation was innovation and rolling out new tools of learning, including digital learning tools. It was amazing to see the number of countries and the number of programs that were being rolled out very, very quickly to enable children to learn while their schools were closed. Now that schools have all reopened and kids have returned back, the key now is for us to harness that sense of innovation, those tools that were rolled out at that time, and continue to enable children to learn dynamically, including with digital learning.
Do you think we'll see some long-term impacts from the pandemic in learning? What are some of the lingering things that concern you?
So we have a growing divide. That sort of equity issue, the difference between advantaged and marginalized children increased during COVID. Marginalized children were particularly disproportionately affected with school closures. Now we also still see continuing that trend of an increasing disparities across the education sector. So what that requires from the UN and UNICEF in particular is to focus in on marginalized children, bridging marginalized children back into school, enabling them to be provided holistic support so that they can be successful at school. The other key point that we learned during the school closures as a result of COVID was the importance of social-emotional well-being and holistic support that children receive at school. We need to provide comprehensive support at schools, a sense of safety, meeting their social-emotional needs, working very closely with communities and parents to be engaged in the school system. So much more sort of broader view of the school and of the education system to enable children to be successful.
Robert, you've spent many years of your career traveling and being stationed in different parts of the world, Asia, Africa. What are you the most proud of? Where do you see the most progress? And what would you like to shine a light on?
Well, I've greatly appreciated. I've been with UNICEF nearly 30 years, and this is my actually 9th posting with UNICEF. For me, what I've most found rewarding in those experiences has been engaging directly with children, with schools, with education systems to see the impact of our work. Sort of to see the incredible resilience of children and their desire to continue to learn despite challenges that they face, and doing all they can to learn with and their parents in partnership with them. So it's just has been incredibly inspiring. Working for UNICEF and the UN system, you have this also incredible ability to be in a classroom in the morning, but then to engage with ministers of education or heads of state in the afternoon and see the policies that can be enacted that will change countries at scale. And that also I have been very sort of proud of and feel very appreciative of the opportunities of engaging with senior decision makers and see their commitment and see the bold actions they've taken to change the world for all children.
Robert Jenkins, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up.
I was going to travel the world, and I came here, and it's just perfect. Why go anywhere else?
UN Insider.
Holding guns. Words protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Stopping biodiversity loss and protecting ecosystems are at the heart of the UN's 15th Sustainable Development Goal, Life on Land. Peru is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. As Dan Collins shows us, that reputation is attracting bird watchers from all over the world, leading to more ecotourism to the country.
Birders beware, it's time to update the guidebook for Peru. By its own count, the country now has more bird species than any other. Ornithologists, park guides and those in the tourism business came together to celebrate the news at Los Pantanos de Villa, a coastal wetland and wildlife refuge in southern Lima. Peru is a paradise for birdwatchers, and it's long been one of the top 3 countries in terms of number of species of bird. Now it's officially number 1 with 1,879 registered species, putting it just ahead of its neighbors and rivals, Colombia and Brazil. By registering 19 more bird species in 2023, Peru brought in the new year with a new record, 10 more than Colombia and 20 more than Brazil. According to the registry of the South American Classification Committee, there are 1,869 bird species in Colombia and 1,859 in Brazil. Ornithologist Fernando Angulo led the count, confirming sightings by amateur birdwatchers.
Colombia is not going to stand idly by and probably will respond and make a similar strategy. But at least for a while, Peru is number 1 for birds.
Peru is one of the world's 17 mega biodiverse countries and contains 28 of the 32 climates on the planet, from coastal desert to mountains to the Amazon rainforest. Scientists say it is that diversity that makes Peru a magnet for birders.
2013, I was going to travel the world, and I came here, and it's just perfect. Why go anywhere else? You've got the Pacific, you've got the desert, you've got the Andes, you've got Amazonia, you've got 1,000, almost 900 species.
Now the government and the private sector are looking to position the country for birdwatching tourism. Tourism Minister Juan Carlos Matthews said birdwatchers accounted for 15% of the 2.5 million tourists who visited Peru last year.
Principally the United States, France, Spain, Germany and Canada are the main countries for bird-watching tourists.
Peru's national parks cover about 15% of the country, but they can only be protected if ecotourism is an economic option for local communities.
This means such a lot because tourism is an activity that moves local economies. The fact that a tourist visits us will contribute to the fact that we continue to take care of our biodiversity.
As Peru's economy tries to crawl out of recession, a new type of eco-tourist could be just the boost it needs. Dan Collins, CGTN, Lima.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.